I used to believe marriages didn't collapse suddenly. I believed they cracked slowly, quiet arguments, long silences, emotional distance. I thought betrayal announced itself with warning signs, with tension you could feel in the air. I was wrong. Sometimes, a life shatters in one sentence. She didn't cry when she said it. She didn't shout. She didn't even hesitate. I want a divorce. The words landed softly, almost politely, but they carried the weight of a building collapsing on my chest. I remember the room more than her face in that moment. The pale walls, the afternoon light slipping through the curtains, the sound of traffic outside continuing like nothing important had happened. I stood there, unable to move, as if my body had lost its instructions. Divorce. The word echoed, hollow and unreal. I looked at her, really looked. She was calm, too calm. Her blonde hair was tied loosely behind her head, a few soft strands falling around her face. Her expression wasn't angry or sad. It was decided, and that terrified me more than tears ever could. Why? I finally asked. It came out quieter than I intended. She exhaled slowly, like she'd rehearsed this conversation many times. I don't feel happy anymore, she said. I've moved on. Moved on. That phrase hit harder than the word divorce, because it implied time. It implied planning. It implied a life she'd been building without me while I was still standing here, believing we were together. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Moved on with who? I asked. She didn't answer immediately. That pause told me everything. I didn't need proof. I didn't need names. In that silence, I understood the truth I'd been too blind or too trusting to see. She had cheated, not in a moment of weakness, not in confusion, but in certainty. My hands clenched at my sides, not in anger, but in shock. I wasn't the kind of man who yelled or threw things. I had always believed control was strength. But control feels meaningless when the ground disappears beneath you. How long? I asked. She looked away this time. Not guilty, just distant. Does it matter? She said. That was the moment something inside me broke cleanly, like glass snapping instead of cracking. Because it did matter. Not to fix things, but to understand how long I had been living in a lie. I nodded slowly, absorbing the pain in silence. So this is it. I asked. You cheat, and then you ask for a divorce? Her eyes met mine again, steady, unapologetic. I don't want to keep pretending, she said. I deserve happiness. That word, deserve, burned, as if loyalty were optional, as if vows were temporary, as if love was something you abandoned once it stopped feeling convenient. I didn't beg. I didn't threaten. I simply stepped back and let the truth settle. Fine, I said quietly, if that's what you want. For the first time, I saw something flicker in her expression, surprise. She had expected resistance. She had expected tears. She had expected weakness. What she didn't expect was silence. The divorce process was fast. Too fast for something that had once meant forever. Papers, lawyers, signatures. She walked through it all with confidence, already emotionally elsewhere. I moved through it like a man underwater. Everything slow, heavy, distant. When it was over, she told me she was getting married again. Soon. I remember that night vividly. I sat alone in the apartment that no longer felt like home. Lights off, city glowing through the windows. My reflection stared back at me from the dark glass. Eyes hollow, shoulders slumped. I had lost my wife. I had lost my marriage. And everyone assumed I had lost my future. What no one knew, what she didn't know, was that this wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of something far more dangerous. Not revenge fueled by anger, but rebirth fueled by silence. I didn't cry that night. I made a promise instead. A promise to myself. If she wanted to walk away believing I was nothing without her, I would let her. And one day, when she least expected it, she would see exactly what she left behind.
The silence after she left was louder than any argument we ever had. No messages. No footsteps in the hallway. No familiar voice asking simple questions. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that forces you to hear your own thoughts whether you're ready or not. I stayed in the apartment for weeks, moving through rooms that still carried her presence. A mug she used to hold, a chair she always sat on. Even the air felt different, lighter, but colder. People assume divorce pain comes from missing the person. That's not true. It comes from realizing how much of yourself you built around someone who chose to leave. Every morning, I woke up with the same thought. What now? Not how do I get her back, But who am I without this marriage? Friends reached out at first. Messages filled my phone. Stay strong. Everything happens for a reason. You deserve better. Words are easy when you're not the one waking up empty. Eventually, even those messages stopped. Life moved on for everyone else. Mine stood still. I stopped going out. Not because I was broken, but because I didn't trust myself to pretend I was okay. I didn't want sympathy. I didn't want advice. I wanted understanding. And I realized something painful. Understanding is something you give yourself. No one else can do it for you. I replayed everything in my head. The late nights, she said she was busy. The distance I ignored because I trusted her. The signs I didn't want to see because love felt safer than doubt. I wasn't angry anymore. I was embarrassed. Embarrassed that I had been loyal while she was planning her exit. Embarrassed that I had believed effort alone could save anything. Embarrassed that I had mistaken patience for strength. But embarrassment can either crush you or wake you up. One night, sitting alone with the lights off, I finally admitted the truth. I hadn't lost everything. I had lost someone who chose not to value me. That realization didn't heal me instantly, but it changed the direction of my pain. Instead of asking why wasn't I enough, I started asking why did I stop demanding enough for myself. I looked at my life honestly for the first time in years. My routines were weak. My focus was scattered. My goals were small because I had made comfort my priority. Marriage had given me emotional safety, but it had also made me complacent. And when she walked away, she didn't just leave a husband. She left a man who had not yet realized his full value. That night, I didn't cry. I wrote. I wrote everything I hated about my situation. Everything I tolerated instead of confronting. Everything I had postponed because there was time. The list was long, painfully long. But at the bottom of the page, I wrote one sentence that would quietly change everything. No one gets to decide my worth ever again. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Not motivated, not inspired, just decided. Decided to rebuild, not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. I cleaned the apartment, deleted old photos, changed my routines. Small actions. But small actions are how empires quietly begin. I didn't tell anyone what I was planning. Not friends, not family, and definitely not her. Let them believe I was still the man she left behind. I had no interest in proving anything, yet. Change doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive with applause or dramatic moments. It comes quietly, almost invisibly, until one day you realize you are no longer the same person you were. Weeks passed after I made the decision to rebuild. There was no excitement in those days. No sudden confidence. No miracle transformation. Just discipline. I woke up early, not because I wanted to, but because staying in bed felt like surrender. I filled my mornings with structure. Exercise. Reading. Work. Silence. The silence was important. I stopped filling my mind with noise. No distractions. No social media scrolling. No conversations that went nowhere. I needed clarity. At first, my body resisted. My mind drifted back to memories I didn't invite. Her face. Her voice. The life that ended. But instead of fighting those thoughts, I let them pass through me. Pain loses power when it's acknowledged without fear. Something subtle began to happen. My posture changed. My breathing slowed. My eyes stopped searching for approval. I didn't notice it at first, but others did. At work, people listened more carefully when I spoke. I wasn't louder. I wasn't aggressive. I was certain. Certainty has weight. I focused on my skills, things I had neglected while trying to be a good husband. Long hours, extra effort, strategic thinking, not to impress anyone, to reclaim myself. Late nights returned, but this time they felt purposeful. I wasn't escaping pain. I was building direction. One evening, after finishing work, I caught my reflection in a glass door. For a moment, I didn't recognize the man staring back. He looked composed, still serious, still quiet, but no longer broken. That's when I understood something powerful. Healing isn't about becoming happy again. It's about becoming whole. I stopped explaining myself to people. If someone asked how I was doing, I answered simply, I'm focused. That answer confused them. Confusion is the first sign you're changing faster than expectations. There were moments of weakness. Of course there were. Nights when loneliness tried to convince me that effort was pointless. That success wouldn't replace love. But I wasn't trying to replace love. I was redefining it. I realized I had loved in a way that made me smaller. Now, I was learning to love myself without conditions. And then, something unexpected happened. A message appeared on my phone. Not from her. From someone I hadn't spoken to in years. A former colleague who had noticed my recent work. "Are you available to talk about an opportunity?" I stared at the screen for a long moment. This wasn't luck. This was momentum. Small but real. I replied calmly, "Yes, let's talk." As I put the phone down, I felt something unfamiliar settle into my chest. Not hope, not excitement, confidence, the kind that doesn't need validation. That night, as I stood by the window watching the city move below, I smiled. Not because I had won anything, but because I finally believed I would. Chapter 3 wasn't about success. It was about proof. Proof that the man she left behind no longer existed. And the man becoming something else had just taken his first visible step forward.
Success doesn't knock loudly. It shows up as curiosity. It started subtly, almost unnoticeable. People who once overlooked me now lingered a second longer during conversations. Messages that used to take days to arrive now came within hours. My presence carried weight, not because I demanded it, but because I no longer chased it. I didn't celebrate these changes. I observed them. That's when I learned an important truth. The moment you stop explaining yourself is the moment others start trying to understand you. One evening, after a long day, I stepped into a quiet cafe near my office. It was nothing special, just a place to think. As I sat down, I felt it, that familiar sensation of being watched. I didn't look up immediately. I didn't need to. Across the room, she sat frozen. Not shocked, not emotional, just aware. Her eyes held the kind of surprise that comes when a memory no longer matches reality. I had changed, not dramatically, not loudly, but undeniably. She studied me the way people study something they once owned but no longer recognize. Our eyes met briefly. I nodded politely. Nothing more. No smile. No tension. No bitterness. Just acknowledgement. And that was enough to unsettle her. Later that night, my phone buzzed. Her name appeared on the screen for the first time in months. I stared at it, not with longing, but curiosity. Why now? I didn't open the message immediately. Power isn't in ignoring someone forever. It's in choosing when to respond. When I finally read it, the words were careful. "How have you been? You look different." Different. That word stayed with me. Different doesn't threaten people, unless they're afraid of what they lost. I replied with one sentence. "I'm well. I hope you are too." Nothing more. No questions. No emotions. No doors opened. The conversation ended as quietly as it began, but I knew something had shifted. She had seen the result, not the process. She hadn't seen the early mornings, the loneliness, the rebuilding. She only saw the outcome, and that's how it should be. In the days that followed, I noticed her presence indirectly. Mutual connections mentioning her name casually. Social media suggestions resurfacing. Familiar circles suddenly overlapping again. She was watching, not because she wanted me back, but because she needed to understand how easily she had replaced me, and how completely I had replaced the man she left. That realization didn't inflate my ego. It grounded me. I reminded myself why I started. Not to be seen. Not to be admired. Not to be remembered. But to be undeniable. One night, standing in front of the mirror, I looked at myself honestly. I didn't see a victim. I saw a man who survived silence, built discipline, and learned self-respect. And I understood something important. The moment your past starts watching your present, it's because your future is becoming unreachable.